I'm from Africa.
You're from Africa?
Yeah.
But was that your family who came in with you as well?
No.
No, okay.
Unless the cops were following me.
They might have been following you. So sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
So it's so good to be here with you guys this afternoon. Thank you for your kind words that you gave me a little while ago. So let me give you some background about who I am. I am Nigerian American. My parents immigrated here in the 70s, and I am the firstborn daughter of my family. Actually, I'm the firstborn period because my parents had 5 daughters. And as you can imagine, in more traditional Nigerian culture, that might not bring a lot of joy to some people, but not my father. So my father is what we nowadays would call a feminist, but back then we just knew him as Daddy. So one of my favorite stories that one of my sisters said about my father happened about 2 years ago. So just to give you an idea about my dad is this tall. He is, at this point, we think 75. Records are not that great back in the day, and when you're back in Nigeria, as you guys might imagine. And he was having dinner with someone in our house. And one of the gentlemen in the house said to my father, "Oh, it's too bad that you didn't have any sons." My father almost beat him up. And my father said to him, "How dare you think that women have less value than men? They have equal value." I never want to hear that come out of your mouth again. So my father is a lot of the reason why I have done anything in my life. My father has always said to us daughters, all of us, that we could do anything. He would always talk to us and tell us, "You know, your mother's much smarter than me." My mom's actually a genius, so she's much smarter than most people. But he always made a point to remind us that we had value. So growing up, all the way up until 5th grade, I was right around 5th grade, I'm the height that I am right now, which at the age of 42 is rather small, but when you're in 5th grade, it's pretty tall. And so I grew up also pretty athletic, a little bit of a tomboy. I was rough and tumble, and I would always race the boys and different things. Then eventually I reached 8th grade. And when I was in 8th grade, I decided I want to go play soccer with all the other kids that are on the field. And prior to the new middle school that I was at, girls and boys played together. It was no big deal. So then I get on the field, and I'm ready to play soccer with all the other kids. And the boys on the field said, "Girls don't play soccer. You're not allowed to play with us. Leave." I remember being shocked because that was my first experience with someone telling me that I couldn't do something because I was a girl. So later on that evening, I went home to go talk to my father and basically cried on his shoulder. And I don't know if this is similar in other people's culture, but in my culture, there's not a lot of, how can I put this delicately? Are there any other Africans in the room by chance? Sweet. How our African parents are not exactly the type to go like, "It's okay, baby." They just kind of get to this point. They're very pragmatic. They're like, "What's wrong? How are we going to solve the problem?" So I go to my father, and I'm like, "Daddy, this happened." And my father goes, "Nnena, are there women fighting in Desert Storm?" I'm like, "Yes, Daddy." And he goes, "There you go. Never let a man ever tell you, or not a man, never let anyone tell you that you can't do something because you're a girl." And I went off and did my own thing. What I didn't realize is that my father was instilling in me a sense of belonging and a sense that I could do anything because I was simply his daughter and I had the capability to do anything. So take that experience with my father, who probably against his better judgment told me I could do anything, and Nnena Ukuku decides after finishing law school to move to San Francisco with no job in hand. A little bit insane. So I moved to San Francisco. I start working with startups. I realized I enjoyed working with startups as an attorney. And then I started networking. And at these networking events, I met other founders. And I met a handful of founders who are also African American. And that group of founders that I met, we formed a relationship, not thinking anything of it. We started having dinners. We were just close friends. And then one of our co-founders, Chris, decided to go to South by Southwest. And when he was at South by Southwest, he discovered that the black tech founders that lived here in San Francisco, and not just San Francisco, the Bay Area, were not connected to each other at all. So he comes back and he's like, this is not okay, because the way that founders of companies receive funding is through their network, and we need to figure out a better way of doing this. And so we got together and we said, okay, well, let's just start creating networking events. Again, we didn't think anything of it. Have a happy hour, invite people over. We put a splash page up that said, coming soon, Black Founders. We had people, before we even said what Black Founders was, reaching out to us from all over the world, literally all over the world. England, like New York, you name it, they were reaching out. They're like, so when is Black Founders starting? We're so excited to join. And internally, we're thinking, we don't even know what we're doing with Black Founders yet. We just know that we need to connect people to each other. So we had our first event, which was a happy hour, and we thought that maybe at most we would get 10 people. We had about 50 to 60 entrepreneurs show up in the room. And they weren't just entrepreneurs that were what I like to call play entrepreneurs. You know, people who like to, hang out at like startup functions, but they're really not doing anything. But these were people who are doing amazing things. One woman by the name of Lisa Dyson, who, if you get a chance, Google her, was doing some interesting things in biotech, where she's helping us create better food sources for our community. We had people who were starting all sorts of e-commerce startups. We had people who ended up starting startups involved in education. We had people who were investors. All these people came to the event, and we thought, okay, so this seems to be sticking. Okay, let's start doing educational events. So then we started what ended up becoming Black Founders, where our whole goal was to connect and to equip founders. And we based our model off of another organization that was was formed here in San Francisco, actually in South Bay as well, which also took another minority group of people to start, which was the Indian community, to help that community invest and grow companies. And we looked at their model and what they started 30 years ago and said, we're going to copy, not fully, but we're going to copy what happened with this model, and then started building out Black Founders. So fast forward to a couple years ago when I had I was still involved with Black Founders, and someone reached out to me and said, hi, I was wondering if you would come speak at an organization called Praxis. And this is where this actually ties back to all of you guys in a second. So I decided to say yes to speaking at Praxis. Now, Praxis is a faith-based organization that focuses on creating entrepreneurs. And during the summertime, they have a program where they work with college students. Well, they realized within their college program that the people in the room were increasingly only a certain, white was basically white, of a certain socioeconomic background. And they wanted the room to look more like what we see right now here in the room today. So they purposely reached out to speakers and to other people to make a more comfortable environment for communities of color to step into. So I decided to go to Praxis and speak on the stage and talk to some of the students about what their responsibility is in the future. And one of the things that I talked to them and shared with them was the story of a woman named Esther. For those of you who are not familiar with the story of Esther, Esther is a woman who grew up as part of an oppressed group of people, way back in old biblical times, however you want to phrase it. She was Jewish, and her people were oppressed and occupied by another group of people. And during that occupation, the king of that time in Babylon decided that he no longer wanted to keep his current wife. And so he got rid of his wife. We won't get into the details of that. And then started a kingdom-wide search, beauty pageant for a woman to become his wife. So, started a beauty pageant, and this young lady's uncle wisely understood that if people knew where she was from, that she would automatically be disqualified. So he told her, don't share with them that you're Jewish. Just keep it quiet. So sure enough, she won the beauty pageant. She now was the king's wife. So at the same time, her uncle, Mordecai, a little bit similar to my father's, a little bit, I don't want to say hot-headed, but just full of pride, in a good way, not in a bad way. And the king at the time also had a man by the name of Haman, who was also in power as well. And during this time, Mordecai basically got underneath the skin of Haman. And Haman then went to the king and said, this gentleman who's from this particular people group of the Hebrews, they need to be wiped out. They're a problem in the kingdom. And so the king then sent out a ruling saying that a certain day, all of these people that were Hebrews would be killed. So Mordecai comes to his niece's house and goes, who knows if for such a time as this, you were placed in power? Maybe you being the king's wife was not accidental, but was for the salvation of your people. I sit with that story, and I'm actually going to do the same thing and say the same thing to all of you in this room. If you're in this room right now, even if you don't feel as if you have power or any sort of privilege, you do. You're in a place that people wish that they were at. I have family members in Nigeria who do not have access to the things that we have access to here. All of us can walk the streets in San Francisco and meet people who don't have access, people who look like us, who maybe need our voice to speak up for them. And so, who knows if the reason why you are in this room and the reason why you have the jobs you do and you've gone to the school that you've gone to, it's not just for you, it's not just for your immediate family, but maybe it's for a greater goal. When we started Black Founders, we just thought we were just creating a company. We didn't think that much of it. And about a year and a half ago, I met two people that were impacted by our organization. I met them at a really good time in my life when I was just really wondering, did we actually make a difference? And as I was on this bus with one of these two individuals, this woman started crying and she said, I don't think you understand. Until the organization came around, I didn't have a name for me. I didn't know that there were other people like me that were doing what I was doing, that were wanting to build a company. And because I knew I wasn't alone, I then started my own Black Founders community in Cincinnati. And now she's actually started an incubator and she's funded quite a few companies. I had no idea that the impact of having a simple happy hour would have on her life. So anyways, I end my talk with this. You have so much power. Even when you doubt it, you have so much power. Please do something with that power.